called himself the Errol Flynn of the B movies. But the truth is, he mostly didn't get the girl.
Yeah, it's Judy. You know, Doc, I've loved her for a long time, but I can't help her now because, well, you're the one man, so be nice to her, will you?
But he did get a wife.
Just something I forgot to do in the rose garden.
His first, Jane woman. And he did play bit parts in A movies with the biggest stars of the day, movie after movie, year after year. Regarded not as a star, but steady. His career got a big boost from a supporting role. Football legend George Gipp in Newt Ruckney, All-American.
Rock. Someday when the team's up against it, breaks are beating the boys. Ask them to go in there with all they've got. Win just one for the Gipper.
But there were always movies. Even as president, watched hundreds of movies, mostly at Camp David over big bowls of popcorn. And if too many people wondered if an actor could or should be president, Reagan didn't. The acting was just part of the picture. At his museum in Southern California, the Hollywood years are relegated to just one wall, because for most actors, Hollywood is a pinnacle. For Ronald Reagan, it was a prelude. John Blackstone, CBS News, Hollywood.
As president, Ronald Reagan tried so often to remind us that from we the people, not need it be said the government, would come the solutions to our greatest problems. He asked a nation to find within itself the greatness that he considered its birthright, and he sought to make us equal to the task by reminding us of our collective heritage. Reagan was the great communicator, yes, but was also a master at communicating greatness. He understood that, as he once put it, history is a ribbon always unfurling, and managed to convey his vision in terms both simple and poetic. And so he was able to act as a conduit to connect us to who we had been and who we could be. That's part of our world tonight. CBS will be back later tonight with a special broadcast on life and death of former President Ronald Reagan. That special broadcast begins at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 Central. Until that special broadcast, Dan Rather, CBS News in New York. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, click on cbsnews.com. Brought to you in part by...
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States.
Ronald Reagan's life was an American dream.
He looked presidential. He acted presidentially. He had dignity.
From Hollywood,
win just one for the Gipper.
To the world stage.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The great communicator with that great sense of humor.
One of my favorite quotations about age comes from Thomas Jefferson. He said that we should never judge a president by his age, only by his work. And ever since he told me that, I've stopped worrying.
Tonight, echoes of history.
I didn't know I shot. In fact, I was still asking, what was that noise? I thought it was firecrackers.
An intimate portrait of our 40th president.
If you will look back over his life, somehow he got everything he wanted.
President Ronald Reagan, remembered.
This is a CBS News special report. Ronald Reagan, the death of a president. From New York, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening. Tonight, we remember Ronald Wilson Reagan. The 40th President of the United States died today in Los Angeles. He was 93 years old. The official cause of death, pneumonia. But the former president had been battling Alzheimer's disease for 10 years. With him, when the end came, his Bel Air, California home was his caregiver in his final years, former First Lady Nancy Reagan, and their children, Ron and Patty. Reagan became president in 1981. CBS News correspondent Leslie Stahl covered the Reagan White House.
Ronald Reagan strode into the American presidency on that sunny January day in 1981 like the moral, good guy sheriff we'd seen him play in the movies.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear
that I will...
He looked presidential. He acted presidentially. He had dignity.
Edmund Morris, Ronald Reagan's biographer, was given unprecedented access in the White House. He took me back to the president's boyhood home in Illinois, where he says he first began to figure him out.
I always feel that when he was president, that his largest mission in life was the moral leadership of the United States.
He says Ronald Reagan saw himself as a savior with a mission to tame the government, get it off the backs of the American people. And he wanted to make sure that the United States loomed large on the world stage. Gone was the Carter administration and the melees it had come to stand for. Brandishing his landslide, Ronald Reagan ran all that out of town. And he did it quickly. In fact, by lunchtime on his inauguration day.
So we can all drink to this one.
The new president was able to announce what America had waited 444 days to hear.
Some 30 minutes ago, the planes bearing our prisoners left Iranian airspace and are now free of Iran.
52 Americans held hostage by Iranian militants would be coming home. Though there's no evidence he had anything to do with securing their release, Ronald Reagan was the beneficiary. He got right down to business.
And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
Proposing massive tax cuts and deep spending reductions, which the Democrats criticized as trickle-down economics and welfare for the rich. But the wrangling and political backbiting stopped cold when a gunman opened fire, an assassination attempt. It was just 3 months into the presidency.
I didn't know I was shot. In fact, I was still asking, what was that noise? I thought it was firecrackers.
The bullets from John Hinckley's gun missed the president's heart by an inch. He almost died. And you write about how this changed him.
He became, for the first time in his life, spiritual. He felt that he had been spared, and everything he did after that, he did with the sense that it was for the permanent good of the United States.
The shooting made Ronald Reagan a hero and helped him restore power to the presidency.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
His proposal to cut government and taxes passed in the first 100 days of his presidency.
If you will look back over his life, you will notice that somehow he got everything he wanted. He always prevailed.
To see you.
He was charming and appealing, a movie star turned president, up to his reputation as the great communicator as when he commemorated the 40th anniversary of D-Day on the beach at Normandy.
We stand on a lonely, windswept point on the northern shore of France.
And liftoff.
A space shuttle Challenger's astronauts, including a schoolteacher, died before the world's eyes. He led the country in communal mourning.
We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them, this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God.
When it came to his enemies, he rode them hard, like the Soviet Union, which he called the evil empire.
To ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call...
I was there when he did his evil empire speech. And it was breathtaking, and he was really greatly criticized for this.
Well, a lot of Russians will tell you that when he used that language, that biblical language, the evil empire, that was when they, for the first time, began to accept the fact that they were indeed an evil system.
The president asked Congress for an additional $180 billion in defense spending. He put mid-range nuclear missiles in Europe and aimed them at Moscow. When it came to the Russians, it was always high noon.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
He understood the power of images. Only one person could stand in front of it and say that and not give the impression of hokiness.
In your book, do you give him credit for basically ending the Soviet Union?
I certainly think that if it was not for his moral confrontation with the Soviet Union, with